Good afternoon, all. This is Josh here at Azzad. Welcome. Thank you for attending today's Zakat webinar. We are watching folks enter from the waiting room, and others are slowly trickling in as well. Welcome, welcome, one and all. And we will be respectful of your time and get started fairly promptly. Just a quick housekeeping note that today's webinar is being recorded and will be shared with all the registrants shortly after the conclusion today. So looks like we've pretty much reached a critical mass. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Again, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Azzad Asset Management's 21st annual Zakat webinar. Been doing it a while. If you're a first timer or a long timer, either way, welcome aboard. We appreciate you being here today. There's a lot to learn about Zakat. I learn something every year. And I should clarify, Zakat, for those uninitiated, is the obligatory charity owed by Muslims. Today's presentation will provide a brief overview of who should pay it, what types of property it is owed on, and how to calculate it on certain financial assets. We'll also review some tax smart strategies to make your Zakat payments and how to evaluate charities and other recipients deserving of your Zakat. Let me also remind everyone that this webinar is intended for educational purposes only. If you're looking for a fatwa or religious opinion, speak with your imam. This is a field that is constantly evolving with new research and scholarly jurisprudence, and we try to stay abreast of those developments. But again, we always advise you that this is for educational purposes only. With that, let's get started. Today's speakers are on your screen right now. I'm Josh Brockwell. We've already met. Investment Communications Director here at Azzad. I'm responsible for all things marketing and also spearhead our shareholder advocacy program. Also joining us today is Fatima Iqbal. Fatima has 15 plus years of financial industry experience, is a certified financial planner, and works with clients on comprehensive wealth management solutions, including estate planning, tax planning, charitable giving, very appropriate for today, and asset allocation strategies. We're fortunate, by the way, to have Fatima with us at Azzad. About a third of financial advisors, roughly in the US, are CFP professionals. And from that small bucket, only 23% are female. Even fewer still are minorities and Muslim. Bashar Qasim, our founder and CEO, will be joining us today as well to answer any questions you might have. He's one of the leaders and foremost experts on halal investing in the United States. Bashar holds the Certified Sharia Auditor and Advisor, or CSAA designation from AOFI, the Accounting and Auditing Organization for Islamic Financial Institutions. That's really the gold standard for Islamic finance rules and guidelines worldwide. And of course, we'll invite Bashar when he joins to feel free to interject any additional comments during the presentation as we go along. We'll also be joined by a very special guest, whom we'll get to momentarily. For those who may need a refresher, quick word from our sponsor. Here's a look at who we are at Azzad. For over 25 years, we've been helping high-income professionals build their wealth in accordance with Islamic values. Today, we manage around $1.6 billion for more than 1,000 families across the United States. What makes Azzad unlike many other financial firms is the quality and nature of our advice. Can't emphasize that enough. It's centered around you and your family, driven by a higher purpose, of course, and designed to help give you peace of mind, knowing that your financial life is on track. With that, I'll turn things over to Fatima Iqbal, Senior Financial Planner at Azzad. Fatima.
Thank you, Josh. So just some background, Azzad follows halal investing guidelines from AOFI, which stands for the Accounting and Auditing Organization for Islamic Financial Institutions. So the Zakat calculation guidelines that we're going to present today follow the AOFI rules. And AOFI's comprehensive standards are based on a consensus by internationally renowned Islamic finance scholars covering 8 schools of Islamic thought. So again, what is Zakat and who should pay it? Zakah is actually obligatory on every living Muslim. Now, this is regardless of your gender, your age, or your mental status, as long as you own assets that meet the other conditions of zakah. But if these conditions aren't met, then it does not remain compulsory. So you may be asking, what are those conditions? And let's take a look at those now. Here we'll list them, and then we'll talk about them a little bit more in the next few slides. So the conditions are: one, owning at least the minimum amount of wealth known as the nisab. Secondly, the lapse of one lunar calendar. There must be complete ownership of the assets by a particular person. There should be no other reason an asset is not zakatable, like insolvency. And the assets must have some real or assumed growth. Now, first, the total amount of wealth owned by an individual has to meet a minimum threshold, and that's called the nisab. And the nisab relevant to us today can be determined based on the nisab of gold or silver. And right now, that's about 85 grams of gold or 595 grams of silver. And the value of 85 grams of gold in late February this year was around $8,000. So again, any Muslim who owns zakatable assets worth that much and who has held these assets for at least 12 lunar months is going to have zakat obligatory on them. And again, for silver, it's around $625. So what happens when wealth now reaches the minimum amount, or the nisab? The next condition that we look at is that these assets should be held for a full lunar year, and that's called the hawl. That starts from the day it reaches the nisab. So zakah is actually not particularly due on a specific day for everyone, but it should be paid at least once per lunar year. Now, many Muslims choose to pay their zakah during Ramadan. Again, there's the additional blessings of giving during this month, and also it's just easier to remember from year to year. But again, zakah is not required to be paid only in Ramadan. Each individual can set their own hawl date based on when they've held their zakatable assets for, again, a minimum of one lunar year. Now, for people who choose to set a hawl date based on the solar calendar, the percentage for zakah is adjusted and it's raised up to 2.577% because of the fact that the solar calendar is a little bit longer than the lunar calendar. And by the way, there is no zakah owed on accounts that have incomplete ownership. Now, what defines complete ownership is settling, ownership vesting, accessibility by the owner, disposable by the owner, and no interference by others. So to help understand this, let's take a look at how this applies to investment accounts. Now, before we begin to discuss calculating zakah on stocks, we first need to talk about this issue of ownership of accounts. Again, types of accounts that stocks can be in. So for these accounts, we should refer to the conditions of zakah to see whether the owner has complete ownership. Zakah is owned on accounts with complete ownership on the amount owned after taxes and penalties. So, for example, let's say an individual has an IRA and they can access the money in the account even though they would have to pay a penalty in taxes if they sold it before reaching retirement age. This fact actually does not prevent the IRA from being zakatable, but we calculate the zakah based on the amount that would be left after the applicable taxes and penalties. Now, on the other hand, an employee may not be able to withdraw from a 401k account at their current job if they're below the distribution age. Now, this 401k would not be zakatable until the employee either leaves that job or they reach an age when they're allowed to withdraw from the account. If you're not sure whether you're able to withdraw money from your 401k, you can read about it in your plan's provisions in your 401k summary plan description, and that's something that you can request from your employer. So just to note, the third condition that must be met is that assets must be completely owned and vested by a particular person or family. So that means assets owned by an organization or government are actually not zakatable. And complete ownership requires that assets be accessible and disposable by the owners without the interference of others. Again, owing taxes or penalties on an asset if you sold it, again, does not nullify the fact that you own it.
Hey, Fatima, let me jump in. This brings up a question we receive quite often related to ownership. And that question is, I'm working and I have a 401k. I don't have cash outside my 401k. Do I owe zakat on my 401k that I can't withdraw? It sounds like the answer is no, provided that the questioner is unable to access that account.
Right, exactly. So if your 401k restricts you from making a withdrawal while you are still working at the company, then in that case, you don't have complete ownership. And again, I would highly recommend getting your hands on a copy of that summary plan description from your employer, which will tell you exactly what your 401k plan's rules are.
Great, thank you.
Sure. So moving on, assets that are zakatable are going to include gold and silver, cash equivalents, assets that are intended for trade or sale, good current debt, livestock, crops, and minerals. Now, all cash, gold, and silver are going to be liable for zakah at 2.5% based on their values on the day of the haul. And again, remember to adjust to 2.577% if you're using the solar calendar. And there are certain assets on which zakah is not owed, which are important to understand as well. So assets that are considered to be capital goods, like tools or factories, are actually not zakatable themselves. But the income that is derived from them is zakatable, again, upon meeting the conditions we talked about earlier. Also, any personal use property that you have is not zakatable. So that could include your personal residence that you live in, your vehicles, your clothes, and other personal belongings. And it's also important to note that only halal and lawful assets are liable for zakah. So there's no zakah on assets which are haram or unlawful, like money that's derived from interest or gambling or alcohol, pork, things like stolen money or bribe money, or again, any other kind of impure money. And such assets or money actually should be returned to their lawful owner or donated to charity as purification. And finally, assets intended for retained ownership and for the purpose of deriving income are also not zakatable. This means that zakah is not owed on the current market value of investment property and income-oriented stocks. So let's say that you have rental property. Zakah is actually not paid on the market value of that rental property, but income that is derived as rent and is held for 1 lunar year is then zakatable. In calculating the zakah, we're going to add up all the zakatable assets minus any debts that are payable by the haul date to find the zakah base. It's important to keep in mind that zakah is due on assets that you've retained for 1 year and not on income or profits that you've had for less than.
So on this subject, let me interject again very quickly. We have a couple specific questions about which assets are due for zakat. What about gold and silver used for personal use, like jewelry?
Right. So generally speaking, personal use assets are not zakatable. Now, there's a slight difference in opinion when it comes to jewelry, in which the Hanafi madhab actually does have zakah on jewelry, but all the other madhabs actually don't. So again, the intent is important here. If you've bought gold, for example, for investment purposes to hold onto as a form of an investment, in that case, based on your intent, it could be zakatable.
Perfect. Thanks. There is a pop-up question here. Just want to get to very quickly on a similar subject. What if a person's retired but haven't withdrawn anything from their IRA yet? Still zakatable?
So that's a great question. Now, if they have retired and they move that money from their 401k into an IRA, they now do have complete ownership of it. I'm assuming if they're retired, then they may be a bit above the age of 59 and a half, when there also may not be any penalties for them if they make that withdrawal, but there would be taxes that would be due. Now, the fact that they owe taxes does not nullify the fact that zakah is due. So they would actually have zakah that would be owed on that IRA after taking into consideration applicable taxes.
Perfect. Thanks. And we'll talk about that in just a moment, actually.
Yep, so let's talk about solvency as well. Now, solvency is important because a person must be solvent, meaning that they must have assets that are greater than their current debts due in order for the zakat to be due from them. So if a person has debt that is immediately due, that is greater than what they own, then they're not going to be liable for zakah. But let's talk about this a little bit more. Let's take a look at zakah that's for zakah on debt that's owed to you and debt that you owe to others. This topic also relates to modern financial assets because bonds are also a form of debt. However, interest-based debt securities like bonds, banking notes, CDs, commercial paper, money markets, and others that are liquid are going to be liable for zakah only on the principal amount of the market value only on the principal amount or the market value, whichever is lower. Now, any gain due to the interest accrued or the market appreciation is not going to be recognized as lawful and is therefore not eligible for zakah. And again, these gains should be purified by donating to charity. Now, on loans you make, you owe zakah on any amount that is repaid as of the hawl date if it's in good standing. But if the loan is past due and it's in bad standing, then no zakah is owed until you recover the debt, and the zakah is paid once for all past years that it was in bad standing. Now, in terms of debt you owe to others, if you have taken a loan and you owe debt, the amount due before the hawl date is deductible from your zakah base. But debt payments that are due after the hawl date are not going to be deductible from that zakah base. So let's take for example, a current home mortgage payment. Now you can deduct the current monthly balance due from your zakah base, but not the entire amount. Also, interest from any debt acquired in a non-halal way should not be deducted from the zakah base. Also, if you have a debt that's a result of acquiring commercial assets known as arud tijara, you can also subtract those from your zakah base.
Okay, so this is a popular topic, and I just want to clarify here, Fatima. If someone has assets of $100,000 and also a debt of $100,000, but only $1,500 of that debt is owed immediately, they still pay zakat?
Yes. So again, remember, they are going to pay zakat because their zakat base is their zakatable assets of 100,000 minus only the debt immediately owed. Now, the debt that is immediately owed at the time of the hawl is $1,500, not 100,000. So again, the entire debt of 100,000 is not going to be subtracted when finding the zakat base.
Got it.
Now, as we discussed, zakah is going to be obligatory on halal assets that have been held for one full lunar year after reaching the minimum amount of wealth. This is also going to include cash that you have. Now, most of us acquire money at different times throughout the year. It may be from salary or from gifts, and we may spend it at different times as well. So one question is, how do you calculate zakah then on cash? Do you have to track each and every deposit held for 1 year and then pay zakah on the 1-year anniversary of receiving it? As you can imagine, this method could be very cumbersome to track. So an easier method is to pay zakah on all the cash you've held for 1 year since reaching the nisab. This will inshallah bring a greater reward and also raise you higher in status. It is easier to calculate and tends to be more generous towards the poor and needy and others who are going to be entitled to that zakah. So for example, if 1 year ago you had $10,000 in your account and the value drops mid-year to $5,000 and now it's come back up to $15,000 in your account, with this method you would pay zakah on the $15,000. So we have gone through who is liable for zakah and what assets and account types of zakah are zakatable. So let's now talk about the calculation of zakah on stocks. We'll use common stocks as an example since we get a lot of questions about those. And of course, our clients at Azzad know that we calculate zakah for them on an annual basis, and we send a statement showing the total amount to be purified and paid from all their portfolios. The calculation can be used for shares of publicly traded companies that you acquire. And for the purpose of this explanation, we're going to assume that the stocks held follow halal Islamic guidelines, since again, a reminder, zakah is not owed on shares of stocks that are not halal. Now, there are 3 basic intentions for purchasing a stock, either for trade, income, or appreciation. And for example, you may purchase a share which you intended to trade and sell, or you may purchase a share for the dividend or the income it provides. Or maybe you purchased a share for its intrinsic growth or appreciation. And while a shareholder may reap the benefit of trade, appreciation, and income from a particular holding, the original intention of why it was purchased is going to be the key. Unlike taxes, we don't have the IRS looking over us, but zakah is a matter between ourselves and Allah. And your intention and actions regarding your investment determines which calculation to use. A zakah of a portfolio of stocks is going to be calculated by, again, adding the zakah owed on stocks purchased for trade, income, and appreciation. Now, with this distinction, let's take a look at how we can calculate zakah on a portfolio of stocks. So stocks held for the purpose of trade and appreciation are going to be like assets that are held for the purpose of trading and are considered commercial goods, or in Arabic, arud tijara. Arud now means non-cash, and tijara refers to items that are intended for profitable trading. And for these shares, the zakah base is going to be the total closing market value of shares owned, or again, the net asset value on the hawl date. Again, the hawl date is the day that you decide to calculate your zakah every year. The net asset value is then going to be multiplied by 2.5%, or 2.577 if you're using the solar calendar. To give you an idea on how to calculate zakah on stocks intended for trade, let's take an example of an IRA account investing in a stock that has a market value of $50,000 on the hawl date. To calculate the zakah, we're going to account for a 10% penalty if this person is under the age of 59 and a half, and also their tax bracket. So for this example, let's assume this person is under the age of 59 and a half, so they're going to have a 10% penalty, and they're in a 15% tax bracket. So we're going to calculate the zakah by multiplying $50,000 times 1 minus the penalty rate times 1 minus the tax rate by 2.5%. And this will give us the zakah due on the amount they would have in hand if they were to withdraw from their IRA account. Now, one thing I would mention as well, the tax bracket here is going to depend on what your tax bracket would be once you withdraw that amount. So sometimes pulling out money from your IRA might increase your tax bracket. So that's another area that you're going to need to be a little bit careful in. Now, stocks held for the purpose of deriving an income, dividends, have an intent that's going to be different from those shares which were purchased for trade or appreciation. The zakah is not paid on the market value of the shares owned, but instead on the zakatable assets in the balance sheet allocated to the shares owned. In this case, we must look through to the underlying company's balance sheet. So the portion of company assets, which are used for income generation, like capital goods, properties, equipment, those are not zakatable. But other assets that may be on the balance sheet, like cash or inventory, are zakatable. So for example, a company might have 80% of assets on their balance sheet that are not zakatable and 20% that are zakatable. Also, any current debt and long-term financing of zakatable assets is going to be subtracted from the zakatable assets. And this is then divided by the number of outstanding shares. We're going to then be left with the zakah base, or zakatable assets per share. And then there's a third category of stocks, which are held for the purpose of appreciation. These would be purchased without the intent of trade, but to buy and hold, again, for their intrinsic value. And similar to stocks intended for income, zakah is not paid on the market value of these shares owned, but on the zakatable assets in the balance sheet allocated to the shares owned. So we do understand that these calculations are not as easy or simple, and it's again one of the reasons that we calculate it for our clients.
Hey, quick question, follow up to this. Someone's asking, how much zakah do I owe on my stocks when I'm investing on my own for growth?
Okay, so for growth, I assume they intend, again, that they are buying a stock and intending to hold it for long-term growth. So in this case, the zakah would be calculated this way. It would not be paid on the market value of the shares owned, but on the zakatable assets in the balance sheet allocated to the shares.
Okay, thank you. So this next slide is going to talk about another question that we received regarding the specific categories of zakat eligible groups.
Yeah, that's right, Josh. So these are the categories of people or the causes that can receive zakah, again, according to the Quran.
So quick one on this subject has to do with giving zakat to people of other faiths. Don't see that on the list. Or what about to fund general causes like medical research or education? Those aren't mentioned on the slide either.
Right. So zakat is specifically paid by Muslims to Muslims. And the fourth category that you see here, those whose hearts are to be won, may be those who are non-Muslims. And the distribution categories mentioned in the Quran are exclusive. So any beneficiaries or recipients of zakah have to be examined against these categories. And through ijtihad, the categories can be interpreted to cover specific beneficiaries.
Got it. Okay.
So how are we also going to be planning for zakah? Now, many of us spend our working years saving and investing as we plan for life's big goals, like retirement. And in our financial plan, we also must remember that zakah is a calculation based on zakatable assets, not income. And as we accumulate assets over our lifetime, zakah as a percentage of wealth can also increase. And alhamdulillah, while this is a good problem to have, it's also important to plan for an increasing zakah as assets grow. Now, zakah is owed each lunar calendar and it can be prepaid, but it cannot be delayed without a valid reason. So it is crucial to plan for how you're going to pay zakah in years when your income might be less, like in retirement. And this kind of planning can also help us align the tax benefits of charitable giving to years when deductions are valuable and allow you to give more over your lifetime while paying less in taxes. At Azzad, we're pleased to help our clients with tax-efficient ways to donate to charity. We'd like to mention the benefit, for example, of giving long-term appreciated securities. And this way, the charity receives the same economic benefit as a cash donation, but you, as the taxpayer, receives a tax deduction for the full market value of the gift, and more importantly, avoid paying capital gains taxes on the gifted security. There's also strategies like donor advised funds, which can also help you organize and give to charitable organizations. Essentially, a donor advised fund is a charitable account to which you're going to make a tax deductible donation, and then you can direct those funds to be donated to qualified charities of your choice without being restricted by tax-related deadlines. There's also charitable trusts, and one popular trust that many of our clients use is a charitable lead trust. And this is a special kind of trust that allows you to give money to charity while also giving you the opportunity to reduce income, estate, or gift taxes, or even help you transfer assets in a tax-efficient way. Now, when you fund this kind of trust, a percentage you determine will be donated to charity every year. But the unique thing is that at the end of the trust term, the balance can return to you or your family. And then there is waqf planning. A waqf can be a pool of investment capital that you can create for a charitable cause that can generate returns and become a reliable and continuous source of income for a charitable cause. Now, please stay tuned. We have an exciting new product coming up in the next few months, inshallah, the Waqfi DAF, which will allow individuals to create a personal waqf that can enable them to leave a lasting legacy. And if any of these kind of perked your interest, please make sure to talk to your Azzad advisor to understand which of these would be a good fit for you.
Question on the subject of different types of tax advantage accounts. If someone sets up a donor advised fund or CLT or WAPF, are these accounts themselves zakatable?
So in this case, no. Donor advised funds, charitable lead trusts, other charitable trusts, and irrevocable wealth are restricted accounts because the ownership is incomplete. And they don't owe zakat themselves. But again, there may be other types of zakat that are zakatable, depending on whether the other conditions of zakat are met. I'd also add one other point here that whenever funds are donated or contributed to any of these various different charitable vehicles, the zakah is not considered to be complete at that time. So the contribution, for example, to a donor advised fund does not constitute zakah. However, when money leaves the donor advised fund and is granted to a charitable beneficiary that meets the categories of zakah, that is whenever zakah is completed.
This is Bashar. I would like to add or alert to a practice that I've seen with many charities here in the US, Muslim charities, that when they receive donated securities in kind and the intention of the donor, it's for zakah. Unfortunately, many of them, they sit on that security speculative one. Well, what they need to do, they need immediately to liquidate it and convert it into cash, because zakah itself cannot be sitting in a speculative type of investment. It should be in cash or cash equivalent. etc. But this is something like really very common, I see. So what the donor needs to do once they donate it to their donor advised fund or to the registered charity, to inform them immediately to liquidate it. There is no need to sit on it, because what counts for zakah is exactly what receive the recipient. So you don't want the value to fluctuate, and then the recipient gets less than what your zakah obligation is.
Also a really good point. Thank you, Bashar.
So I mentioned, again, how, planning. I wanted to just share an example here so you can get a sense of what kind of planning can be done to incorporate, again, retirement and charitable giving. So this is an example of a family who has accumulated, alhamdulillah, a generous amount of wealth of around $8 million. And they have a generous goal of wanting to give almost all of it during their lifetime. Now, with that generous goal, there's also a competing factor, which is how can they ensure their own needs are met while still amplifying the good that they can do? So creating a financial plan and utilizing tools like a donor advised fund and giving to charity through their IRA, which is called a qualified charitable distribution, this can allow the family to give almost $7.6 million over their remaining lives. It can also save significantly in taxes, and also help ensure that they continue to maintain their current living and healthcare expenses. Furthermore, these strategies can be used to pay zakah during retirement or also establish waqf, which again enables the grantor to protect the principal and pay income to charities even after their passing. Now, before giving money to a charity, you do want to make sure the organization is legitimate and your donation will actually reach those in need. So here are a few great tools that you could consider using. The first one is the IRS Nonprofit Charities Database. I actually use this tool quite a bit. And when you go to the IRS website, you can find the Exempt Organization Select Check tool. This tool allows you to enter the name of an organization or the EIN number and see if the organization is exempt or not. And this is important to verify whether an organization claims to have a 501c3 tax exemption status is actually exempt. And if the organization is not exempt, then your donation is not going to be tax deductible. There's also Charity Navigator, which rates charities based on their financial health, their accountability, and transparency to help donors make informed decisions about their contributions. And they evaluated over 8,000 tax-exempt charities. So, again, if your organization is not on the list, that might be an indicator that you need to dig a little bit deeper. And finally, there's GuideStar. And GuideStar maintains information on 501c3 nonprofits. Their financial documents, like the 990, can help you evaluate the legitimacy of the organization. Now, the 990 is basically the tax filing for the organization, and it's going to disclose where and how an organization's donations are spent, including the earnings of top officers. And all nonprofits are required to have an up-to-date 990 available to the public. So if it's not on their website, you can ask them for it, and they should be forthcoming in providing that to you. And there's also 3 things that you could consider and should take a look at when evaluating a charity. So first, it's important to take a look at their financial health. Again, you can take a look at the Form 990, and it's a good idea to take a look at how much they're spending on overhead. Try to find an organization that's going to spend at least 70% of its funds on programs, not on overhead. And you can also check for evidence of the charity's commitment to accountability and transparency. The best charities are going to be those that are transparent and are going to be accountable to the public. And again, you should be able to see evidence of this in the information they have on their website. Can you find information about the charity staff and their board of directors? Did they publish a 990? Do they have any audits that you can look at? Bashar, I'd actually like to bring you in here to talk a little bit also about the zakah distribution process. I know this is another concern that comes up when we're talking about clients is, whenever I, for example, donate to an organization and I intend for this to be zakah, what things do I need to be aware of to make sure that the organization is going to consider this as, again, zakah distribution?
Yeah, that's a good point. the first thing is you want to make sure that the organization, like in like hold the zakah money in a halal account, for example, not in an interest-based. So they have really to show some commitment to use a Sharia compliant vehicle, either leave it in cash or probably in a capital preservation fund, but it shouldn't be, for example, sitting in a interest earning account, because that's really the pure of your money. Also, the organization, they have to have control and check and control and balance and show like procedures and policies where they can carry forward the zakah. Make sure, for example, like to keep segregating if they do other charitable activities and they have zakah, they want to make sure that the zakah money is segregated to make sure that it's distributed to the 8 eligible distribution channels. So you want to emphasize on that. And also, they should really, beside that, like they should have like some kind of a plan to deliver your zakah money and not to hoard it, because the zakah, it's supposed to be reach its recipient as soon as possible. They should, unless there is really a legitimate cause for the zakah to be delayed. It's sinful actually to be delayed. Like while, for example, we may have some crises and situations that would prevent delivering the zakah in certain areas, that's understandable, but there should be a legitimate cause for that, and you need to check with the organization to make sure that they are aware of that. Also, they should be like efficient in how they spend the zakah money. They should really try to minimize the cost of delivery as much as they can. They need really to be very careful. You probably want to check, like, for example, the administration costs that they have should be minimal. I mean, even as somebody who's really delivering the zakah, they could be actually eligible to receive part of the zakah as what they call وَالْعَامِلِينَ عَلَيْهَا وَالْعَامِلِينَ عَلَيْهَا, those who really operate delivering the zakah. That shouldn't be any problem, but it should be what they call bil ma'ruf, according to what is exactly known to be reasonable. These are a few things that I think it's important that you check on the organization before you deliver your zakah. And also don't forget, like, you need to perform due diligence on the organization. You need to ask questions. As usually when you're dealing with money, you always want to make sure that you deal with competent, professional people, not because it's just zakah, just to throw it and you turn your face away. No, you need to ask a question. You need to make sure that your zakah is really reaching the eligible people. So you may want to ask questions. You may want to talk to people and see how they really handle your zakah money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Bashar. I mean, those are excellent points. I would even add, taking a look at the results that the charity has had in the past. So, learning about their accomplishments, their goals. And again, you can hopefully take a look at their website, but also talk with their staff, really to get an understanding about the quality and depth of their results too. And also their capacity to continue to be able to get those results, not maybe just the number of activities they've had or the people that they've served.
And also, like, asking for examples, like to see how your zakah impact their charity. Maybe you ask for stories, people who benefited from the zakah, what actually changes that they made on the ground.
Perfect. Now, one point of order, I do see questions coming through fast and furious. We will get to those at the end. Just in the interest of moving today's session along, there's a Q&A portion at the end of today's webinar. And some of those questions will probably be directed toward our special guests this afternoon. Let's take a moment to discuss how his charity works and how Zakat is applied. I'm talking, of course, about Dr. Mustafa Musleh, a Palestinian-American medical professional and founder of the Palestinian American Medical Association. Dr. Musla received his medical degree from Al-Quds University in Palestine in 2004. Before he moved to the United States in 2007, Dr. Musla worked at Al-Quds Medical School as a research and teaching assistant. He then joined the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, or UNRWA, and was serving in the free medical clinics in the refugee camps there. Dr. Musla co-founded, I mentioned, the Palestinian American Medical Association, or PAMA, with a group of colleagues in 2013, and has been a board member and is currently serving as the president of the organization. Welcome, Dr. Musla.
Thank you very much, Josh. Thank you, Fatima, and Bashar, and everyone here in the meeting. I appreciate this opportunity to present my charity to your audience.
Thank you for being here. We'll turn it over to you for the next few slides to talk a little bit more about PAMA.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And it will be quick, so I'm not going to take too much of your time, and I'm happy to also answer any questions. I'm going to give an overview of our work in the past couple of years mainly, but also we want to mention that PAMA was founded in 2013, and we have been conducting health projects in Palestine, in both the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem for the past 10 years. So our first project was in 2014, actually, a little over 14 years. And we've been growing, we've been increasing our reach and building capacity. Can we go to the next slide? So our mission is mainly to transform the healthcare in Palestine by delivering emergency medical relief, strengthening healthcare systems, building local capacity, and fostering long-term resilience through innovative and collaboration and advocacy. Next, please. Our programs, we have 4 main programs. We do crisis intervention. As we know, in Palestine, there's a crisis almost every couple of years, and we've been living in a crisis for the past almost 1.5 years now. And that is becoming one of our biggest fund. And, we deliver mainly health services, but we also do some other humanitarian aid support on occasional basis. Capacity building is another area that we do, and that's building capacity in the human resources, the people, the doctors, by training them, by sending them to get specialized, get more training, and also by strengthening the hospitals with machines and devices to improve their services. We are very focused on education, so we do have education program sending doctors to get medical training outside, and they come back and go back to Palestine. And those are usually subspecialty doctors who train outside and come back to deliver services. We also have a scholarship program for the poor and achieving students. And then clinical services is mainly a big part of what we do, providing certain clinical services, surgeries, medical missions, and so on. Next slide, please. I want to give an overview of our work in Gaza in the past couple of years, and all of this has been throughout the crisis. We're not going to present our work before the crisis. Just to showcase our impact, we have projects across Gaza, North, Middle, and South. We do leverage partners in the ground like the UNDP and the WHO to enable us to deliver some of those projects, but we're also present on the ground. We are registered with the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank as a foreign organization, and we used to have an office in Gaza. That is, we have a staff in Gaza, but we used to have like an office in Gaza, a satellite office. But the main projects or programs in the north, as you see, a 3.4 million project to support one of the main hospitals in the north area. We run their ICU and we run their operating room, pretty much providing them with training, providing them with staffing. We cover also medical supplies and medications and disposables. In the middle of the screen right here, We have Al Zawaida Hospital, Field Hospital. We started a hemodialysis program. They had a hemodialysis program, but we expanded it. We built more dialysis units, and we are also providing them with same thing. We send doctors through our medical missions to train and build capacity, and also send disposables and medications. In the South, we restored or reinitiated cancer treatment in the European Gaza Hospital and Nasser Medical Complex. In the European Gaza Hospital, it's a big project. It's actually more than 6.5 million. This is our contribution. But the project we have a co-finance from Direct Relief. We're also providing a lot of the chemotherapy medications. It's a big US-based organization that send mainly medications and supplies. And this is pretty much the first project that restored cancer care in Gaza. Cancer was not priority in the past, year and a half, unfortunately, but a lot of those patients are early phase cancer, and we felt treating them will save a lot of lives. On the right hand of the screen, I want to go over quickly a couple of things. Medication, medical disposable. We send always like supplies and medications to the hospital, and they ask us to. We sent 12 medical missions dispatched between January 2024. Those are doctors, many of them from the US, some of them from all over the world. We send them, and they do mainly non-communicable diseases, emergency surgeries, orthopedic, trauma, and so on. We also started a mental health service for the healthcare workers. The healthcare workers in Gaza have been working nonstop for the past 500 days, and they have been through a lot of trauma, psychological, and we started with the World Health Organization a program to try to build or restore their resilience and help them to cope. Can we go to the next slide? This is a good project that we're doing. Also, is very kind of innovative. We utilize telemedicine in it, and this is a dermatology project. So we nestled 10 different clinical points for skin diseases. Skin diseases have been widespread through Gaza. We are partnering with the Palestinian Red Crescent Society, so they have multiple locations for primary care, but we added dermatology clinics. And the nice thing about this is actually we have a big group of doctors, dermatologists from the US, who joined together with us, and we created this very kind of innovative application, and we trained staff in the Gaza, and the doctors here helped to also kind of support the diagnosis and help with cases through telemedicine. So this is in progress. Today, I was told we treat about 100 patients a day in those clinics. Next. In the future, we are planning actually very soon here, gonna launch those. All the projects that I mentioned are projects we're implementing and we're actively doing. Two big projects we're working on: higher education recovery in Gaza. We are working, this is a big budget project that we are putting together to restore medical education and some of the medical classes. Then we have a multidisciplinary rehabilitation service for people who are affected with disabilities, who lost their limbs, to provide them with prostheses and rehabilitation after that. So those are in the planning phase right now. Next. And then, of course, we do some other humanitarian work. We don't do a lot of this, but we do it. For example, we have a campaign in Ramadan. We are sending iftar meals. We are sending suhoor, Eid clothing, and we target mainly the most vulnerable. We target in this area. Of course, everyone is in need, but we are targeting also a lot of orphans, a lot of people with disabilities, and some shelters who had pretty much nothing. And then we are going to build also in Ramadan, inshallah, we are going to build about 20 clay ovens for families and camps to be able to also bake bread and do that stuff. So this is part of our Ramadan initiative for food and non-health services. Next. Those are our partners. We have a lot of international partners national and local partners on the ground. Our partners, sometimes they help us in certain aspects like logistics. The UNDP, we have a great partnership with them. Direct Relief is a huge U.S. organization. They have been supplying us with medications, helping us with logistics, getting through the border, getting them through the airports and to the ground, to the eventual location. And of course, we work with many U.S. organizations as well. Thank you very much. That's it for me. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have, and we truly appreciate your support. I want to mention also that we accept stocks for in-kind donation as well. And I was actually we work with Azzad, and we probably have. I'm pretty sure we have in the policy what to do with the money when it comes in, and I think it just kind of, this presentation today was a great opportunity, and a good education for me as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Dr. Aslam. We did have one question regarding sort of a pragmatic question regarding how aid is actually delivered, specifically in Gaza, understanding the fact that there are still limitations, restrictions with respect to getting and surging supplies to the area. Practically speaking, how does PAMA do that? I think some of the folks out there who are very motivated by this cause, which is certainly noble and admirable, are perhaps a little cynical, skeptical about, or depressed as it relates to actually getting aid to those who need it most. How does PAMA do that, and what metrics do you have in order to show progress?
Absolutely. No, we have, it's extremely difficult. I mean, everyone knows, and it's a unfortunate situation that we have to deal with all those restrictions, and they do slow our work. I can't say that it will not, and they do slow everyone's work. But we always try to find ways to get things in. Again, by building partnerships, I think those were very helpful for us. Like, for example, our partnership with the UNDP facilitated a lot of our logistics because they have better access and in clearing up, shipments and medications and those kind of situations. We do have also like long-standing relations. I mean, we've been there for some time, so we have our financial accounting and all that stuff have been set up even before the war. So it is we have been dealing with difficulties even before the war. I know now it's like much more difficult, but we have channels through Jordan, we have channels through Egypt, we have channels through the West Bank. We have also, channels through the UN organizations. It is hard. It takes more effort and time than it used to before, much more. Medical mission, for example, it's extremely time consuming for us. We have a lot of staff who try to kind of facilitate that, but aid gets in eventually. But it's there are restrictions and we can't change that. But I would encourage everyone not to get discouraged from donating to a reputable organization because of those because the need is huge and massive, and you just want to make sure that your organization that you're donating to, you trust them, you see your work, and you kind of have they have that ability and that presence in the ground to deliver their projects. But I know of multiple other organizations who can still do a lot of work in Gaza, and without them, honestly, the situation would have been terrible. I mean, those patients that we're treating in our programs, they had no care before that. And adding that program, providing that medication, we know for sure it saves lives.
Thank you. So please do stick around because I anticipate questions, follow-ups regarding the presentation you just gave, but I will also, at this point, open things up for broader questions. And I will actually begin the process of filtering through quite a few that have been trickling in throughout today's webinar. And let me kick things off, though. Fatima, let me bring you in. we'll get the ball rolling with a question we receive regularly on purification, which is the dollar amount that's paid on halal investments that have very small amounts of impermissible income. Do you want to take a crack at that one, explaining it?
Sure. So purification actually has to do with giving away in the impermissible money in your investment. So it's actually not a form of zakah. It's not sadaqah either. It's really intended to rid yourself from the impure money that you never intended to benefit from. And this could be things like the amount of interest income a company might receive. It's possible that a company could be halal to invest in based on the majority of its business, but it may have a small, insignificant portion of impermissible income represented in the stock price. So what we do is we calculate the purification for our clients and the Azzad fund investors. If you have Azzad funds, you can actually take a look at our purification calculator on our website. And the purification amount is what should be given away. And also it's the amount that is going to be subtracted from the portfolio value before you calculate your zakah.
Perfect. Thank you. And Bashar, let me bring you in here. We had a question regarding the permissibility of giving zakat to those 8 categories we mentioned before, specifically something maybe a little broader. They're asking whether or not zakat money can be used for a well to benefit an entire community. Does that fall in one of those 8 categories? Is this something that should be maybe asked of a scholar in their area? But just can you comment on broader charitable initiatives that benefit larger groups, such as the building of a well? You're muted if you want to hop off.
Sorry, that's a good question. Well, if it benefits the 8 eligible recipients, yeah, absolutely, no problem. Just want to make sure that it really goes to the poor, because the zakah is from the rich in the Muslim community distributed to their poor. So as long as being sensitive to this requirement, absolutely, there could be used for providing services that benefit the recipients.
Okay, and then since we've got you, a quick follow-up, still on that subject of permissible recipients, are masajids and civil rights organizations
You're right.
eligible for zakat?
Yeah, I think scholars discuss this in many zakat conferences, and I think it's really well known, and we talked about it every zakah webinar. We get this question. I think all these organizations that they are defending the faith, that would be falling in the broader sense of fi sabilillah. Masajid also the same thing. They do like a lot of da'wah. They preserve the identity only in non-Muslim countries, correct? Then those would be in the broader sense of fi sabilillah, in the cause of Allah. So those, I think many scholars, many zakah organizations and conferences, they address these issues, and I think there is a good consensus that it is really eligible for zakah.
Perfect. Thanks. And Fatima, let me bring you in, and we'll ask a question about, we talked about 401ks and there's accountability earlier. This person has a question about, well, it's an interesting scenario. If someone has a 401k account but no available cash, so it's a liquidity issue in their bank to pay the zakat, are they obligated to actually pull money from the 401k with a penalty in order to pay it? How does that actually happen?
Right. So first of all, I think you have to see again whether that 401k is zakatable. So going back to the question is, do you have full ownership of that 401k? Can you take a withdrawal while you're still working? And if the answer is yes, like for example, in an IRA, and there is zakah due, then the zakah is due. Now in terms of liquidity, that may require that you have to take a withdrawal and have to consider the penalty. But I would say like this is another reason why zakah planning becomes really important, right? Because zakah is based on your assets, not based on your income. So it's very possible that you may have significant amount of assets that are zakatable and not have the income to pay the zakah, right? So making sure that you have the liquidity available to pay for zakah, understanding how much you would anticipate your zakah being, all of these become really important in making sure that you can continue to meet your zakah obligation.
Perfect. Thank you. Dr. Musla, also a question for you. We talked a little bit in the presentation in broad strokes about how to assess sort of quote unquote legitimate organizations. There's a question about sort of vetting, especially in today's political climate. What would you say to someone who's interested in PAMA, maybe on the fence? How do we make sure that the organization is on the up and up?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a good question, and I would say yes, because of where we work, it feels like everything is targeted. But I would say this. I mean, we do everything by the book. We have our financial, transparency. Every penny, every dollar is accounted for, and it is all what we do is vetted heavily. So we are non-political. We are following the law. We abide by the law of the land, and we have no intention other than helping the people to get healthcare and services, and that is, I mean, our stance and our statements, all of them reflect that. So we try to maintain that neutrality. Because we are physicians at the end of the day, we are doctors, and we want to do like medical, care and medical help. And we try not to engage in any kind of political discussions or any of that. Which kind of, I think, for the part also, like, medical seems to be a little bit less maybe risky area for humanitarian aid, and that's kind of something to consider. I'm not saying you should not give for food, and those are very, very important. But I mean, it's from like risk, status is like just because all what we do is very clearly medical, and we have a very strong program team that they know what they're doing, and we have multiple audits, actually, internal audits and external audits that were done, financial and non-financial as well, to kind of review our practices and program implementation, and make sure that we have low risk implementation of our programs. So that is something that, again, it's very important to look at a lot of factors when you consider charity. There's a lot of good charities, and there are some charities who may not necessarily take those things seriously, and that's very, very important for the donor to do their homework. We are a 4-star, charity navigator. That's the highest charity navigator status. We have the highest transparency also sealed from the Guide Star. So we kind of check all the boxes in our financial reporting and auditing.
Dr. Musla, I would just also ask, it seems like by partnering with other organizations, probably you also have to do some internal due diligence when you decide to partner. What is that process like when you decide to work with another organization as well?
Yes, absolutely. We do vetting for anyone we talk to. It's just in the current climate, anyone we have any relation with, we do heavy vetting. And also we are vetted when we work with organizations like the UNDP. They vet every single board member. They vet everything about the organization. Same thing with the WHO, direct relief. So this kind of double way of vetting. So, I think it's good to have those partnerships, because that also tells you, like, those organizations, every organization want to maintain their work and want to make sure that their things are going. And yes, sometimes that may increase the admin costs a little bit. Our admin costs, we keep it at a minimum. Last year it was 6%. We expect it to be a little bit higher this year because of our growth and increased focus on monitoring and evaluation. But we're going to try to maintain it at a very competitive level. But at the same time, this is where those kind of things come important to for the survival of the organization in the current climate.
Sure. So I am going to now kind of do a more rapid fire question and answer session for Bashar and Fatima. And it looks like the bulk of these questions revolve around when, if, or where you pay zakat. And we'll just start with a toss up. What if your plan allows 401k withdrawal with penalty? Wouldn't that make the 401k balance eligible for zakat since it can still be liquidated to cash?
Correct. Yeah, it's like an IRA, right? So if you can take money from it, irrespective of whether there will be penalties or taxes, that means you have complete ownership and it's zakatable.
Besides,
Okay.
the penalty is already reduced from the zakatable base. So when we calculate zakat, we reduce penalty, taxes, all of that stuff. Yeah.
And Bashar, not a lot of context here, but I'll ask you the question nonetheless. If you bought a property that your parents live in, do you owe zakat on it?
No, apparently it's not intended for a trade, so would not be zakatable. So these are kind of like capital assets.
Let's say they pay rent.
You collect rent from it.
Hypothetically, let's say they do
Yeah,
that.
the rent, whatever lasted after the lunar year, that would be zakatable. But that would not be as an income, by the way. Although they say, oh, it's an income, but if it lasted after 1 year, then these are assets now. It's an asset that you held for more than lunar year and above the nisab. So that's zakatable as cash.
Perfect. And Fatima, this next one you addressed, I believe, but let me just ask again. Is money owed on an IRA if the amount changes during the year?
So you're going to be taking a look at the market value of the IRA on the hell date. So the hell date, remember, is that day that you pick. And that's the day that you're going to calculate your zakat every year. So you want to take a look at the value, the market value of the IRA on your hell date.
Okay. And this next one, Fatima, we'll stick with you, related to debt. If someone owes you for use of your credit card, can it be owed zakat if the amount changes by making monthly payments?
So I'll answer this maybe a little bit more generally. For example, if somebody owes you money, right? And again, they haven't paid you yet, then you do not owe your zakah. But again, if they've paid you, then you need to pay the zakah for all that is owed. I'm not exactly clear what they mean by making monthly payments. Zakah, once it is due, it is due. You can definitely, again, plan for your zakah by prepaying it on a monthly basis. So let's say, for example, my zakah tends to be around 12,000 a year. Maybe I say, well, I'm going to start paying $1,000 a month in anticipation for my zakah payment that's going to be due the following lunar year. Then that's fine. But again, once it's due, and it should be you should try to pay it as soon as possible.
Perfect. And they did have a question about paying zakat monthly. So it sounds like that is doable.
Yeah, by the way, like zakah, you don't have to wait until, for example, the end of the year or Ramadan. You can prepay your zakah for a year, 2 years in advance, 3 years. It was reported an incident of the Al-Abbas, the uncle of the Prophet, peace be upon him, that he used to prepay the zakah a year and 2 years and 3 years in advance. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, used to accept it from him. So that's no problem. You actually now with the availability of donor advice fund, you can donate your zakah, or you can donate funds in the donor advice fund, correct, and then invest it, and then anytime you get an opportunity for a zakah, you can advance money, you can pay from that donor advice fund during the whole year, or maybe even in advance. Sometimes you may get an opportunity, for example, through hardship, things like happen all of a sudden, like what happened, for example, in Gaza, or maybe an earthquake or a flood, where you get really an excellent opportunity. So again, managing, keeping your funds liquid, or charitable funds liquid, so you can pay your zakah, is a smart thing to do.
Let me also ask you, Bashar, a question I see here on differences among the madhabs on zakat. Do you want to talk a little bit about methodology and AOFI? We alluded to them at the beginning, but maybe it's worth going into a little more deeply.
Correct. I mean, there are really, like any other issue, there are different opinions in in about Zakah. But the good thing about AYOFI, and they have this is really what I call them the golden standard in the industry, and it's not really different from other reputable Zakah institutions like the Fiqh Council of OIC, the Kuwait Zakah House. These are organizations with tremendous amount of resources, and they dedicated a lot of research in the Zakah. So, and the good thing about AYOFI, they publish it as a standard number 35. You're right, you could find some people disagree, isolated opinions, but I wouldn't really rely on it when in the presence of a scholarly institution that has a due process when they come up with a standard that is really being looked and revised on an ongoing basis. I think I lean toward these standards than going with these isolated opinions.
Perfect. And that responds to a couple of questions you received on, I guess we'll call them alternative methods of calculating Zakat. So yeah, I think that's good.
I saw one, for example, they consider it as what they call al-khariju min al-ard, it's exactly dealing it as a farm. That's really different. It's not popular. Maybe a scholar as a way of suggesting it, but it did not really get to the level where it's really adopted by, I would say, the majority of the scholars. I think with the beautiful thing with AYOFI that they have a due process, very coherent, very repeatable. Sometimes the standard takes 2-3 years before they adopt it, and also subject to revision all the time. I think with institutions of that sort, it just making these individual opinions to be insignificant, I would call it. I wouldn't rely on it when something like this that needs a lot of expertise and understanding. AYOFI, they utilize experts you'll find available to their scholars, accountants, auditors, lawyers, etc., to really give them a good understanding of the issue. As we said in the scholarly knowledge, al-hukmu ala shay'i far'un min tasawwurihi, that the fatwa is as good as how you understand the matter of subject in it.
I think that's a perfect place to end here today. I will take the opportunity to inform everybody about our upcoming and on-demand webinars. Next month, we're looking at scheduling a session on what every Muslim investor needs to know, very timely for the month of Ramadan. And then also our on-demand webinars, including our 2025 State of the Company presentation and a great one on Islamic estate planning held in December. Please be on the lookout, by the way, for more information about the live webinars very soon. I want to thank everybody for being here today. Always informative. I learned something every time. Really appreciate it. This is going to wrap up today's presentation. I'd like to thank our guests, Dr. Musla, of course, Fatima and Bashar for being here, and a special thank you to everyone who took the time to be here live with us today. If we did not get to your question or fully answer your question, or you'd like more information, please reach out to us. The email address is hello@azzadasset.com. Be sure to follow us on social media. The handle for our Facebook and YouTube accounts is @Azzad Funds. You can also find us on LinkedIn under our full name, Azzad Asset Management. Thank you so much again, everybody, for being here today. For more information and timely updates, please follow us on social media, as I said, and visit us at azzadasset.com. We hope you enjoyed today's presentation, and thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.